Welcome to the Bank Tellers, where we speak to senior bank leaders from banks across the world. My name is Sheryl, and today I have Deven Somaya with me from Citi. So, Deven, when I was looking through your LinkedIn, I noticed something very interesting. You spent the past 24 years at Citi. That's actually an adult already. Whole adult. So how did you manage to find your path and decide that banking is what you want to do?
Cheryl, a very good morning to you. It's genuinely wonderful to be here and have this conversation. I almost could have avoided my morning cup of coffee with that wake up that you've just given me of spending 24 years both working and in one organization. But listen, it's been an awesome journey. It's been truly fabulous. I'll give you a little context and background because you asked about the start and the into this. I grew up in India. I spent my formative years schooling, education till undergrad in the city of Mumbai, Bombay when I was growing up. And then I completed my engineering like many people did back then and was trying to figure out what next in life. And there was one thing which always excited me, which was the world of finance. And back in the day, for anyone who didn't know too much, it was investment banking was the term that was floating around. And in order for me to make that career switch, I decided to do an MBA. I pursued an MBA and I went to the US. This was late 90s, early 2000s, with the intention of, I wanted to do investment banking. And through the 2 years in business school, the other word that was heavily thrown around was consulting. But I had no idea what either of those two actually meant in terms of, work and what that entailed. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out by meeting people who were in the field. In my first 2 years, actually my first year in business school, I used to fly off to New York. I used to meet people who would entertain me for a cup of coffee and really understood what consulting and what investment banking, both the life and lifestyle meant. And guess what? It took me about a year to figure out that that's not what I wanted to do. So my first year in business school was just kind of spent in realizing that everything that I had set myself on the path for was not what I wanted to do. And I started learning about different parts of the bank though. And realized that there's elements of banking that actually thoroughly excite and interest me, and that's how I got in. I did my summer in the bank. I came back as a management associate, and this was in New York in the early 2000s. That's where my journey started, Cheryl.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, you in retrospect, right? The 1 year that you spent realizing that, hey, this is not cut out for me. Like in retrospect, it's actually a very short time. And previously, I was having a podcast, and one of the topics that we talked about was like career pivots when people realize midway or like very much into their careers that, hey, this is not for me. And in one year in retrospect, right? That actually is just a blip. But what actually really caught my interest was like you said that you grew up studied in India, and then from there you decided to broaden your horizons, pursue an MBA, right? And recently I was just reading this book, and then there's this term that came I got to know. It's called unveiled. So it is the perception, the lens of like you as a person shaped by your upbringing, your various philosophies and everything, right? So how would you say your upbringing has shaped who you are today and how you function as a professional adult?
Cheryl, it's such a wonderful question, and I hope I do justice to the question because I'll tell you, as you pointed out, it's been 24 years working, and I think you go through a journey in those 24 years. And when I started working as someone from another country, started working in a bank in a country far away from home, for me, conformance was very important. That how do I conform to whether that was in appearance, whether it was stylistic, it was in work ethic, you conform to people around you. I almost think, and maybe this is my journey, right? But I almost think that in that journey, the concept of personal identity in the earlier parts of that journey were lost. Not in a bad way, it was just probably suppressed, right?
Yeah.
But I think, as time evolved, second, I think is professional maturity evolved. And that journey took me to different parts of the world. You meet people, you interact with colleagues from different parts of the world. That professional self-discovery, and I'm being careful with the choice of words because that professional self-discovery was very important. And I think we're today in a time where being your authentic self at work is so important. But it's been a journey in the corporate world to get to this space. And I also look back, I think my own journey has also kind of evolved in that space, from from conformance of adhering to someone or a self of me which was not the true me, to now becoming a very comfortable professional in really being me at work. And I think we in the corporate world more and more, definitely in our organization, we encourage that a lot. Right, being your authentic self is so important. And that comes down, Cheryl, then to your question on what has shaped me. I think all the core values that come both from upbringing, that come from the friends that you form, and from the discipline that comes in through, whether it's through education, whether it's through sport, whether it's through art, that one it develops and inculcates, I think all come to life and fruition. Now, how quickly or how late it comes for, I think, all of us is our own, that professional kind of journey that we're on. But I think for me, that has really come into the forefront over the last few years, not so much at the start of my career. And I almost see that as a journey. And that's why I think it's a wonderful question you asked. How quickly can you get comfortable in being your true self uh, in the workspace? It's so important
Correct.
because sometimes your work doesn't allow that to happen. And I think if you find a place where you truly thrive, um, you come into the workplace energized and passionate about what you do. I think that's when you truly find yourself.
Correct, correct. And also, you brought up a very good point about being early on being like conforming to fit in, right? Because I think also because as minorities, you South Asian going abroad to work and eventually going to a large MNC to work also, right? And when I first started out, I was a young Asian female in tech. And also I felt extremely pressured to act a certain way. I had to conduct myself in a way where I had to act older, that I had to dress older, the way I spoke, I had to train myself to sound like more poised, that sort of thing, so that people would take me seriously and not like, oh, she's just a fresh grad female in tech. I can so that's a very interesting point. And you know what? This also segues very nicely to your passion project. I know we wanted to talk about this much later, right? But the fact that you went through what you did and now you are giving back because now you've really like established yourself, you found your calling. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. And Cheryl, if it's helpful, I'll give a little context, right? Because again, I think these are also journeys and paths, and some people do get into it. And I was very fortunate that a few years back, a dear colleague of ours who was moving geographies tapped me on the shoulder and asked me the question. And it was about at the time and point in life where I had made a very conscious choice, both personally and professionally, so both outside of office and in office. Um, to be very open to change. And by that, I mean, the question to myself always was, why not? If something comes my way, I'm not going to question it with a, hey, why should I do this? But it was more with a, hey, why not? And I've got to convince myself to not do something, to not do it. Otherwise, I said, I'm going to try new things. I'm going to explore new stuff. And that opportunity, Cheryl, was this colleague of mine was the then co-lead or co-chair of the Citi Women Network. And when he tapped me, it got me thinking a lot. It got me talking to a lot of people, and I'm very, grateful to my then manager, my then HR partners, other colleagues that I spoke with at that point in time, because this goes back about 3 maybe 4 years in the COVID time, if I recall correctly, where I then applied for that opportunity to co-lead one of the inclusion networks, the Citi Women Network for Singapore, and that was the start of an awesome journey. We talked about the whole personal and professional development. This was a great intersection of the two because it meet people who are immensely passionate and putting in hours that go far beyond what the workday entails and involves. And you put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and it's a very fine intersection of that personal and professional journey, and you learn so much. So one of the things, Cheryl, to the specificity of the question, and this was a little bit of that background, is we got involved with an organization called United Women Singapore. And organizationally, we were very fortunate that we were able to go through this project and journey with them. We funded a 3-year project with them where United Women Singapore was teaching curriculum in STEM through another organization here in Singapore. We've gone through 3 years. We've completed 3 years of the program. I think the pilot here had about 35 odd girls that had signed up. And the last 2 years, there was the pilot was so successful that the numbers got close to and crossed the 100 mark in the second and third year, where girls in Singapore from different polys would sign up. It was a 6-month program. They were taught by, like I said, faculty from another academy here called the Fintech Academy, supported by volunteers from our organization that would spend at least one Saturday a month with these young women who are going through the curriculum and helping them. How do you structure? How do you think? How do you present? They became buddies. They became, from mentors, they almost became like buddies. They would talk, they would get prepped, etc., by folks from our organization. It was an entire wonderful journey. And over the course of the 3 years, about 200 plus young women have graduated from this program as they were doing the poly. Some have then gone on to uni, some have gone. You think about Sheryl, and you talked about it, being a young woman in tech. But this is really bolstering the youth from an employability perspective as they march into the workforce, either straight after poly or they do uni and then get into the workforce. So it's really giving them both the hard skills and the soft skills that come with it. Because along with the program, hats off to the people that were running it. They got institutions involved to help them with resume building, or how do you get onto professional networks, to how do you learn the art of networking. I know we got them in, a bunch of the young women into the bank to meet some of the senior leaders in our organization, and was so impressive when they came in and presented. That you almost kind of were taking notes on, like, yeah, hey, maybe I should incorporate that in my presentation approach and stuff. It was very, very heartening to see young women in their late teens who in a 6-month period had evolved and matured so much. And you saw the added benefit. When we think about give back, we almost think that it's at a later stage in life. But these young women who had graduated from the program in their late teens or early 20s, they had started giving back and were mentoring and guiding some of the girls that were getting into the program. So it was awesome to see that give back start so early in the journey. So that's something we're immensely proud of. It is always heartening and heartwarming to listen to the girls that have gone through the program and their journeys and what they're doing now. So yeah, Sheryl, that's the one of the projects that we've been involved with from an organization perspective on this field.
Got it, got it. Okay, so for context for our global listeners who are tuning in, so polys in Singapore, where Devin and I are dialing it from, they are tertiary institutes, short for polytechnics. And that is where the institution arms their young students with technical skills in, would you say, a function in a school of their choice, right? Yeah. So, like, for example, because this is more like a fintech institute, right, that came in, maybe they'll be from like mass communications, maybe in like, were they already in like a STEM major of of
I don't
school
think they
already?
needed to be. I don't think they needed to. The curriculum in this particular program, which was for 6 months, was focused on STEM. And I think that the term that was coined was, this was the ABCDE of STEM, which was focused on, I think, AI, blockchain, cloud and
Blockchain, cloud,
cybersecurity,
and
data, and ESG.
data.
So that was the ABCDE of STEM.
CDE.
Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's how it was. That's how the program got structured.
Got it, got it. Yeah. And it is very, very important that we continue to get more women in STEM, right? Because being in fintech also, we can see very, very clearly. And at Money 2020, this is something that is also something that we adhere to make sure that we have an almost equal split of male and female speakers on stage, so that it's not just an overrepresentation of men in fintech, but we want to continue to
Sure,
allow,
absolutely.
like, correct.
And I think I'd love to get your view on this as well, because I think without a doubt the competency exists. Programs like this sometimes instill the confidence along with the competency which one needs to kind of get out, saying, what, it's all right. You don't always need to be at 100% mark to be comfortable and confident. but you need to put yourself out there. You need to get a little uncomfortable, and that bolsters confidence even more. And I've seen these girls at the start of the program, and I see them after they've graduated and spent a year out as well. The confidence level is incredible, and it just breaks shackles, which I think, and I don't want to call it only self-inflicted, right? There's sometimes societal pressures. There are different kind of challenges that one has, but the confidence that programs like this instill, it helps break all of those shackles, whatever way, shape, or form they exist in.
All right. And I think something else, you talked about hard skills and soft skills, right? But something else that is also relatively overlooked, because I myself, when I was in university, I went through a minor in entrepreneurship. And part of the curriculum was so you have to learn how to like is it 4 Ps of marketing, that sort of thing, like how to
Yeah.
balance a balance sheet, that kind of thing. But the final module was actually to do your own startup. But what I found to be lacking from that entire curriculum, which was very well designed, by the way, was the network aspect. So while we had trainers who weren't, because let's say, so Devin, you have your various like strengths, you have your pet projects and things like that, but you wouldn't consult someone on maybe a startup that you're not too familiar with. So that was like the flaw in the curriculum. And that also, we as a young startup, I know, like, being hungry, putting yourself out there, but being so young, absolutely clueless, that was before, and during that time it was before like all these like startup resources were like out there in the open on the internet. So we had to go to like really hustle to networking events, which weren't also a direct fit for us. And also not just having like a good network of mentors that we could we could consult. I remember at one networking event, we even had like two complete strangers, bicker over our business model. Like students, we were just like don't know what to do. So I think like
You got to
because
instill
you have
confidence,
this,
not kind of shatter it in front of us.
and then because you have this being so established right from Citi, and then you're also in partnership with other organizations, and then that you have like professionals in this industry also giving back and basically educating, being a resource to these young women, that also serves as a very good like mentoring, networking aspect also, which can help to open more doors for young women out there.
Yeah, look, absolutely, and I think, like I said, I think the confidence that this instills, because I think we all, regardless of level and journey we've been on, as we look forward in life, there is always that anxiety. There's always that, oh, am I doing the right thing? Or it's the confidence that kind of helps push us along, drive us along, because it doesn't go away. That sense of insecurity, regardless of whether you've been working or just starting work or in college looking for a job, or whether you're 5 years in your career, 10, 15, 20, whatever, that doesn't go away. It persists, and certain, and going back to your first to second question on the values and your upbringing that you have, along with the things that you learn in that journey, I think they're the ones that help you broaden your shoulders and guide you through those difficult times. So it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And this anxiety, uh, I guess this entire thing, right? So at Money 2020, we also have this program called Rise Up. This is also a mentorship program for women also, right? There was this topic that I was particularly very interested in, and that is where it's on imposter syndrome, where people you wouldn't have imagined, like I wouldn't have imagined to have imposter syndrome. And then they're just on stage sharing so candidly. Devin, being who you are and having achieved what you have for the past 24 years and more, do you still have imposter syndrome?
Cheryl, I think most of us, would be lying if we said we didn't, right? I think we all have that. See, okay, let me put it another way, right? Our journeys are never, you're doing the same thing and excelling and doing the same thing. Part of journeys are, you take lateral moves, you get into areas that you either don't know, or geographies that you're not familiar with, etc. Right? So you always have that inner doubt
Mm-hmm.
of, hey, do I, can I, or will I be able to, or, how will I, that those kind of continue to exist, because I love some of the mentors that I've had in the bank, and I've learned so much from them. Some of them are now outside the bank as well, and I've looked at their journeys and their careers, etc. success has not been just mastering a particular product area and becoming deep domain expert in that field, but it's taking that, it's capitalizing on those skills and saying, you know what, hey, I can apply that and then learn some more, apply that to the next one, learn some more, apply that to, and that's how I've seen careers evolve and grow. And I take great comfort in that fact. In all our journeys, we interview for roles, we get some, we don't get some, but you get the great. I always tell people, I said, don't miss out an opportunity to apply for a job which is relevant, because you get to meet some amazing people. And listen, in an interview, it is a two-way process, and in that two-way process, you also get to ask questions. You get to meet leaders that you otherwise may not have access to. I'm telling you, I've uh, learned so much in asking some of the leaders that have been interviewed by, whether I've got the role or not, was almost secondary or tertiary in that journey. But you learn, understand what their process was in getting to where they've gotten. It's not just and by the way, I'm not dismissing domain knowledge. It's so important, but it's necessary. It's mathematical terms. It's the necessary criteria. It's not the sufficiency criteria. That sufficiency comes from banking that, but then building skills. So to your question on imposter syndrome, listen, we all have it. We all feel we're not good for it. We're not ready for it. But you take the confidence that you build. You take the learnings you have from different situations and learn from it. Like I've been a big believer, Cheryl. People idolize people. They follow certain leaders. I have that with a little bit of a twist where again, it's not about a person, but it's about what you would call in the tech terms as microservices. We all can learn so much from each other, because Cheryl, there may be three things about you that are awesome that I can learn from. Right? There are one or two other things from someone else. There are a few, and if I really like them, I'd love to imbibe them. Right? It's very hard to find that. For me, it's very hard to say that there's this one person and I'm gonna blindly follow. I find there's a lot of awesome things in a lot of awesome people, and I deem them those microservices that people offer. And I learned so much. It's a little bit of a tech term, but it's that which gives that ability to learn, to develop. I'm a big believer in that whole pause and reflect element. Like, I mean, there were times, many times, even now in the day, I just go take a walk around the block. I go sit down over a cup of coffee or whatever by myself to really harness some of those learnings that I see from people. Right? It could be from organizations, it could be from political figures, it could be from industrial leaders, it could be from people around me, it could be from the young MAs that have joined our organization, because they bring such a fresh and new perspective as well, and there's so much to learn from that. That's how I feel that that adaptation, that evolution kind of happens, and you overcome that whole imposter syndrome by adapting some of these into practice.
Yeah, like this constant learning, right? And also you brought up a very good point, because like at across the span of our careers, there's always new, constantly like evolving roles, which also brings us back to like the entire like span of your career, right? Your role has shifted, even like vertical and also geography wise also, right? And that, I guess that also continues to keep you learning, keep you excited. Well, this like 24 years. We keep talking about 24 years, but it's really amazing. But yeah, so what continues to excite you working at Citi?
Sure, it's a great question. I joined Citi for a very interesting reason and I think there were many like me back in the day. Growing up in India, it was a truly global brand name. I think the tagline even back then was "Citi never sleeps," and it was a reference to the geographic reach of the organization. Me, whatever, 26, 27 years back, I wanted to see the world, wanted to explore the world, wanted to have the opportunity to work in different places, meet people from different places, travel to different places, and this organization offered that. And while that was that early foundational view, and of course it was a supermarket of a bank, right? We were present everywhere and did even back then different parts of banking offered in different geographies. That coupled with, and it evolved from that point, Cheryl, to as you start working, you get to know people, and you really start to learn how amazing, passionate, driven, knowledgeable, and smart the people were around you. that you learn so much from the people around you. I think that became the evolution of, as I got into the organization, and met people from different parts of the world, worked with them. I got challenged. I got to, learned so much from, that it inspired me. It inspired me to do more in my career, to to excel in different ways, shapes, and forms, take on different roles, and that's what keeps me excited. That as large and complex an organization we sometimes are, the steps that we're taking are in absolutely amazing directions, and it individually and professionally pushes us internally as well to be better versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that to me is awesome. And then coupled with the fact that we talked about it, right? Being an authentic self at work, getting involved in ways of giving back, all those opportunities exist. It truly exists around us. It's capitalizing on the opportunities that exist, and truly making it career, right? Not a job. It becomes a career. You get so passionately involved with things internally, um, that you look forward to coming into office the next day. And by the way, that doesn't mean working nonstop 24/7. I want to be very clear. I have a lot of interests outside of work as well. So it's, I don't want anyone to take it away that it's a nonstop working culture. It's not. I think that's a big segment of my life, but there's a very other elements to my life as well, and I do give them due course and importance outside of work as well.
Yeah, that's very important. Work-life balance, that is something that I would say a lot of us, we're still trying to figure out, right?
Absolutely, and look, it's not easy, right? I mean, it does get challenged. We're, I think, far more global and connected than we ever were. So but I think we've all got to make the time. We've got to find the time for ourselves, whatever it is, whatever that interests and excites all of us. But I think we've got to do it.
Got it. So beyond the constant learning, and the networking aspect, right? The learning, the microservices that you get from the people that you meet every day. What are you looking forward to the most for the rest of this year, 2025?
Well, it's Sharon, another great question, right? I mean, there's so much happening around us.
Right.
Whether it's in from a geopolitical perspective, whether we look at it from a the changes that are happening around us, which both economically, fiscally make interesting changes and make 2025 a very interesting year, coupled with the technological changes that are happening as well. Right, I think it was a year or two back when AI really got into the forefront, and embracing of that is happening in a big way. Our clients want to talk about it, industry partners want to talk about it, regulators want to talk about it internally. Where there's a lot of conversation around it. I think that makes life very exciting and interesting for all of us, because hiding from it. And I think the more you learn, the more you either listen or read, or whatever that form of consumption of information is, the more you engage with peers and partners, and including at the upcoming event in Bangkok as well, right? I mean, you get to learn so much from each other through those engagements. I think that's what's going to make 2025 interesting. How the adoption is going to take place, how that transforms. Where I think at that pivotal point in that transformational journey. And I don't mean 2025 alone is going to be that. I think it's a journey we're setting ourselves up for. But that. I think that makes 2025 super exciting. I think we all follow the news of what's happening in the US with interest rate, with great anticipation when the Fed meets, for example. What's happening with the monetary policies, or what happens in other geographies that are around us. And then there's a lot of change happening. So I think it's made the start of 2025 has been very, very interesting, and it, I think, bodes well for the 3 quarters that are to come. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be fun and exciting for sure.
Got it. So as we begin to wrap this up, right, I wanted to also back on your most recent answer and also tying everything in, right? So you very correctly brought up the point on how everything is just moving, changes happening so quickly, right? Be it on the technological front, geopolitical front, and it's so much in such a short period of time that you just constantly have to keep track every day. But I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, let's say, a young working professional, maybe just trying to break into the industry, like what we've also spent quite a fair bit of time early on in this podcast talking about, right? So let's keep that to the context of that to this question. So what are some books and or resources, let's do 3 books and or resources that you recommend a young working professional hoping to break into fintech to read?
Look, it's a good question. I don't know if I can necessarily recommend something, so I'll avoid giving very specific things. But look, there's a lot of good content out there, right? Whether one looks at content, which is, I think if you're looking to get into fintech, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that have written their journeys. I think it's awesome reading about their journeys, because what we see is the success. And there are a lot of stats out there, right? For every one success, there's a lot of people that have gone through a lot of failures in that journey. I think it's important to understand that, right? Because look, everyone is where they are. There's one very common element. It's grind. Success just does it. It's not a flick of a switch and something suddenly happens. I think understanding and appreciating that journey, hey, listen, to get there were some failed attempts. There were some challenges along the way. There was perseverance, which kind of got someone through. I think that's super important. I think the basic elements of that career build, whether it's in fintech through entrepreneurship, whether it's in the corporate world, etc. I think there are some common elements which come out, and I think they apply everywhere. I think it's super important reading about those. And by the way, there's a bunch of them out there, right? Which one can follow. The second element is consumption on content, and and that's why I said whether it's reading or listening through podcasts, etc. I think that element also is very important. It helps you kind of stay in touch. It helps you figure out what's interesting and exciting. And look, I'll bring up a third element, because I think that the yin and the yang, the balance is super important. Finding passions outside of professional work also. And by the way, that indirectly also helps build network, whether you're into sport or art or anything else that creatively or physically gets mind and body away from. It becomes very, very important. It really helps in that de-stressing, in that in just keeping your day balanced. I can't stress this enough. It's so important, because otherwise it's just we're overloaded with avenues of consumption, right? Information is all around. There's no shortage of it, and there's no shortage of amount of stuff that's happening around us. So just balance it. Just unplug. Just disconnect from devices. Do something else. Go paint. Go strum a guitar. Go play something. It's so important.
It is, yeah. And especially in this climate, it's so easy to be overwhelmed with the constant streams of information. It's always so much. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Yeah, what do you passionate outside of work? Yeah, because clearly you got a day job. You do stuff like this. You were talking to people on podcasts. But outside of all of this, what excites you?
Volunteering with animals, actually. So I'm the one who always roots for the underdog. Singapore specials, as we call them, are like mongrels, strays. So animal rescue, volunteering at shelters.
Very nice.
That is something that I started doing back at I think it was my third job, when I was in between roles and I needed to find a purpose in life, because I had a lot of my identity tied to who I was at work. And I did suddenly being like out of a job. I didn't know who I was anymore, like what value did I have. So that's when I started volunteering, and I've always had a very soft spot for animals. So yeah,
that's amazing.
Thank you.
That's very touching. Like I said, always learn from people, and it's always inspiring to hear what people do outside of work as well. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today in this episode of The Bank Tellers. Thank you, Deven, for your time. We've gone quite a fair bit past time, but I think it was a very insightful episode. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in.
Thank you, Citi.